Welcome back to another episode of Eerie Excursions, the podcast that takes the road less travelled and a left turn into the shadows with me, Amy, a history nerd who loves a good ghost story. Now, I'm no expert, so along our eerie adventure, we'll meet local guides who know all about the spooky legends lurking in their back garden. And watch out, because we might just be down the road from where you are right now. For today's trip, we're in the northeast, along the coast at Whitby.
I used to do a bit of running, and one of the things was running up the pier to the lighthouse, turn around and jog back, and then fast up, jog back, which is boring as it sounds, but that's what we do. And one morning I was doing that, and on the way back I saw somebody fall off the cliff just there. At first I thought it was like a tarpaulin or a bit of cloth or something, but then I saw there was arms and legs, so I knew it was somebody going over. So I ran on the beach to see if I could help. Couldn't find a sign of anything.
You ready to delve into the darkness? Before we get into today's episode, I'm just going to point out again that Whitby sits right on the coast, and most of today's tour takes place on top of a cliff overlooking the sea. Now, it's stunning and so beautiful, but incredibly windy. I tried my absolute best to fight it, but the wind was relentless, and there will be points in this episode where you can hear it. Now, I'm hoping that you'll agree that it adds to the atmosphere, but I just wanted to give you guys a heads up. Oh, and you know we're right by the coast when you can hear the sounds of seagulls as well. Anyway, as I was saying, Whitby is a picturesque seaside town with some of the best fish and chips in the world, but it also holds some very dark tales. And honestly, it's a gothic lover's paradise. From the looming cliffs to the ruined abbey, it looks and feels like something out of a novel. We'll get back to that later. For now, let's meet our guide.
My name is Dr. Crank, and I was, for almost 20 years, a real Whitby doctor. Not anymore. So I'm happily retired now, and this is what I do now, take people around Whitby, telling them about the strange things that have happened in the town, and also a little bit about Whitby's history itself. It's over 2,000 years old, originally just an Anglo-Saxon fishing village. Eventually the Vikings invaded, and they called it Whitby, which means white settlement, on account of the colour of our sands, beautiful white sands. And Whitby for years was just a fishing port. Actually, in its day, we were the third biggest shipbuilding port in Britain, behind London and Liverpool. But for years it was just fishing until the fishing fleets found it difficult to compete with the Europeans, and now we are virtually just a tourist town. We are, however, a very successful tourist town. As you can see, Whitby it's a year-round place to visit. A lot of places on the coast, in the winter they're closed down. Whitby keeps going all year round. So visit Whitby any time of the year. In the winter, you might get a parking space.
One of the most famous sights in Whitby is its abbey. Sitting on top of the cliffs opposite where we stand, Dr. Crank tells me it was built in 657. And soon after, there was a religious gathering to determine which calendar to follow, the Celtic calendar, the pagan calendar, or the Roman calendar. The Roman calendar was chosen and the date for Easter was set. So whenever you check your calendar, just know that that was established right here in Whitby Abbey. Now, the Abbey and Whitby itself also takes on something of a starring role in one of the most famous Gothic novels of all time.
In 1890, a writer visited Whitby. He was so moved by this place, he decided to write the greatest horror story the world had ever read. The writer was, of course, Bram Stoker. The book was Dracula, and this is Whitby.
Firstly, our stop is a seemingly normal bench, but it's this bench that has a lot of history.
So this is where Bram Stoker used to sit when he was writing the initial notes for the play that was originally called The Undead. And this is where he sat when he was writing these notes. And again, something rather unusual happened on this seat, probably back in the 1980s. Now, the boy involved was never seen again. The girl, however, still lives and works in Whitby. Now, she still bears the physical scar of what happened on this bench. If you meet the girl, she's a barmaid in Whitby, ask to see the scar. She's quite happy to show you the scar for a small fee.
And it's from here we can see down to the beach, where in the novel Dracula lands on British shores.
That's Tate Hill Beach. Okay. And in the book Dracula, that's the beach where Dracula's ship, the Demeter, runs aground on Tate Hill Sands right there. The crew are all dead. Dracula had killed them all one by one. Then he changes into a large black dog, runs up the 199 steps, just the once, mind, to hide in the graveyard, where people do say he still lurks to this very day.
We're not quite done with Dracula history yet, as we turn around, our backs to the harbour below, and up to the Royal Hotel Whitby, where Bram Stoker once stayed.
Whitby's in two halves. We have east side and west side. Now, the east side was where the old fishing cottages were. That's where, if you were a bit poor, you'd lived on the east side. The rich people who developed Whitby lived on the West Cliff, which is where we are now. And one man developed all this area. His name was George Hudson, the railway king. He brought the railways to Whitby in the 1830s. He built all the hotels you can see near now, the Royal Hotel, the famous Royal Hotel. And this is where the rich people lived up here. They had a good view of the other side of the river. Now, the Royal Hotel is quite famous for a number of reasons, but one of them is because Bram Stoker did stay in the room in the Royal Hotel, end room, first floor. And one night he looked out the window and he saw two red eyes staring at him from across the harbour up in the graveyard. Now, what he actually saw was a reflection of the sun as it sunk in the sea. It reflected on the windows in St Mary's Church, lit them up, looked like two red eyes, and that's when he decided to write Dracula. And if you read the book, he actually mentions these two red eyes in the book.
Now, a few doors down in East Crescent, a street a few yards away from the Royal Hotel, is where the book's heroines, Mina and Lucy, stay in a boarding house. And it's in this boarding house that they encounter the Count for the very first time.
One night, a huge bat pecked at the window of the guest house. It summoned Lucy. Lucy sleepwalks across Whitby following the bat. She goes up to the graveyard, and that's where she gets bitten by Dracula for the first time. And Mina, Lucy's friend, she follows Lucy. Where we set off from, up on West Cliff, that's where Lucy would have stood, exactly where we stood. She looked across the harbour. She saw Mina stood there. She looked across the harbour, saw Lucy on the famous suicide seat up in the graveyard, and she saw this figure just about to pounce on her with these two red staring eyes. So that's where Bram Stoker got the idea from the eyes from, because he saw the light reflected in the church window.
So whilst Stoker stayed in the Royal Hotel when visiting, he also spent some time in a guest house nearby as well, at the Royal Crescent. And Dr. Crank tells me about what inspired him whilst he was here.
Dracula was 7 years in the writing. It took him 7 years to actually write it before it was published. And we know he stayed in number 6 Royal Crescent, which is just round the corner here. He only stayed there in the one guest house, number 6 Royal Crescent. He stayed there for about a month. But in those days, when you stayed in a guest house, after your breakfast, your landlady threw you out. You weren't allowed back till about 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock at night. So you used to go to Whitby Library to get books about Whitby, to find strange things that had happened. And it was while he was in Whitby Library, he found a book about Eastern Europe, Transylvania, Romania, and that's when he found reference to a Romanian medieval warlord, Vlad Tepes. So after we read about Vlad Tepes, who eventually was called Dracula himself, that's when he changed the name from Vampire the Vampire to Dracula. Mm-hmm. We don't know for certain if this is where he started the book. It was probably slightly beforehand where he had this idea, this grain of this horror story in his head. But it's certainly where he got the initial influence from, because of the sort of atmosphere of the town.
So Dracula is certainly a big attraction in Whitby, but there are many other stories to tell. So we cross the road from Dracula's Bench and we head to the Screaming Tunnel.
The man I mentioned earlier, George Hudson, the railway king, he built a tunnel in a place called Grosmont, just outside Whitby, where much of Harry Potter was filmed. And the tunnel in its day was the largest railway tunnel in the world. Now, he liked the people of Whitby, so he thought he'd leave them something. So he built them this. This is a miniature copy of the railway tunnel in Grosmont. But something happened in this tunnel in the 1990s. What was it that the woman saw as she entered the tunnel? Why did the temperature drop so much? Who was at the end of the tunnel? And what had put its hand onto the lady's shoulder? This is now called the Screaming Tunnel. And it's a place where if you enter at night, after dark, you just might meet you know who.
Now, the tunnel opens up when you go through it to a gorgeous view of the Abbey on the other side, as well as a view of the town below. So we're still on top of that cliff, and I asked Dr. Crank what happened that night in the 1990s.
She said there was somebody stood at the end of the tunnel. When she turned around to tell her husband, he hadn't actually gone in the tunnel. He was a bit worried. It was pitch black at night. When she turned back, there was no sign of anything. So we don't know. But since then, that's been called the Screaming Tunnel. And it is a tradition. When you get to the middle, if it's dark, you have to scream.
So we come back through the tunnel, turn left on East Terrace, and snake around to Cliff Street.
It doesn't look much in the daytime, but at night, as many streets in Whitby do, it does take on a bit of an atmosphere.
Our first stop is the Dutchman's house.
Well, this is the Dutchman's house. And he was an architect from Amsterdam, built many houses there. And he came to Whitby and he thought, if I build a house in the Dutch style, everyone's going to want one the same. I'll be a very rich man. Now, unfortunately, people of Whitby in those days were so poor, they couldn't afford a house of this style. In the end, he became completely bankrupt. He opened those double wooden doors up on the first floor. He tied a rope around his neck and stepped out. This was then turned into a dance school. But the people who went to the dance school always felt a bit of a tingle down the spine. And when they were dancing, sometimes they felt as though they'd been joined by a third person, the ghost of the Dutchman.
And a few doors down, we have the bakehouse.
Now, my mother used to know the lady who owned the old bakehouse back in the late 1990s. And in those days, that was a pottery called Eden Pottery. And I actually spoke to the lady who used to own what was then the pottery. And she was telling me that when she first went in there, she knew nothing of the history of the building. But just as she got there, one night she was in the kitchen. She went to close the kitchen door from to the outside. Something held the door on the other side, tried to open it. She pulled the door closed, and she heard a girl's voice saying, "I'm coming in now." She opened the door, there was nobody there. Now, she knew nothing of the story of the old bakehouse, where a young girl, Mary Clark, was unfortunately burned to death in the late 1800s.
Next, we start to head towards the Whitby Museum on St Hilda's Terrace, as there is a particularly eerie artefact Dr. Crank wants to tell us about.
Now, Imagine if years ago, if you were a thief, if you were a burglar. It'd be easy to burgle the small Whitby cottages because there was no CCTV or burglar alarms. But if you were caught, you were taken over the river to Abbott's Road, to the gallows, and you were hung by the neck until you were dead. So if you were a thief, you needed some ghostly assistance. You needed a hand of glory. You'd get the instructions for the hand of glory off a witch. Whitby in those days, Whitby these days, many, many witches in Whitby now. Years ago, you'd find a witch in the cottage, in the forest, give her a couple of pennies, she'd give the instructions for the hand of glory. The first thing you needed was the hand of a hanged man. It was quite easy to find in those days. Slice the hand off the dead body, take it home, squeeze the juices out, drain the blood, leaving only the skeleton in the skin. Then you pack the hand with saltpetre, salt ash, mandrake root, and the hand would go back to its normal shape, but not its normal colour. It used to go sort of green mouldy colour, like a rotten pear. You place a whale fat candle on the palm, light the candle, enter a building. Immediately everyone in that building would fall into a deep sleep. You could burgle the building, and as you left, you put the candle out using either milk or blood. You'd wake up, but it'd be too late, you'd made your escape. Or you could hide the hand in the building, and at night the hand would do its work. The hand of glory could crawl across the floor. It could drag itself up the wall. It could undo any lock, allowing thieves to enter. If you want to see a hand of glory, and there's only one genuine one left in the country, it's barely 100 yards from where we are now. Whitby Museum, just up there, has a genuine hand of glory in there. It's in a glass case, it's sealed in, so the hand cannot escape at night. If you want to find the way to the Whitby Museum, you follow the sign of the hand of glory.
So we end the tour where we started, and Dr. Crank shares how he got into telling ghost stories.
That's what we now call the Spa Pavilion. And there's a ghost in there called the Grey Lady, and she's seen falling from the cliff just here, falling to her doom. She's sometimes seen in the theatre. If you go in the theatre, look up to the balcony, you see her walking along the balcony till she disappears. Now, I knew nothing about the Grey Lady. About 8 years ago, I used to do a bit of running, and one of the things was running up the pier to the lighthouse, turn around and jog back, and then fast up, jog back, which is boring as it sounds, but that's what we do. And one morning I was doing that, and on the way back I saw somebody fall off the cliff just there. At first I thought it was like a tarpaulin or a bit of cloth or something, but then I saw there was arms and legs, so I knew it was somebody going over. So I ran on the beach to see if I could help. Couldn't find a sign of anything. And I forgot all about it until it was quite a few weeks later. I was doing the same session with some of the lads, and I mentioned what I'd seen. And one of them said, "You want to go and have a word with the caretaker in the spa?" And again, it was quite a long time before I was in the spa. And I saw the caretaker and I said, "Listen, this might sound daft, but I think I've seen something." And before I could tell him what I'd seen, he described it, and it was exactly what I saw. And he said, "Yeah, you've seen Caroline, the Grey Lady." And he said, "Go and get one of the books on Whitby ghosts. There's loads of them. Have a look through there." And I did, and that's exactly what I saw. And after reading the book, it got me more interested in the ghost, and I did quite a bit of research myself into some of the other stories, and that's why I now do the ghost walk. So I'm still open-minded, but I definitely saw something.
As always, you can visit the places covered in today's adventure and even book on a tour with Dr. Crank. Links to his Whitby walks are in the show notes below. And as you're taking in the Gothic surroundings of Whitby, the harbour, the Royal Hotel with its Gothic history, the Abbey, just watch out for those glowing red eyes. That's it for now, but you can follow the show on Instagram as well at Eerie Excursions. And to be sure you don't miss out on excursion, follow the show below. As it's Halloween week, we'll be going on an extra adventure just down the road from Whitby to Scarborough.
There have been many shipwrecks on this coastline. It is very rugged, rocky coastline. And when there are shipwrecks, there are, of course, lost souls. And these poor, unfortunate sailors would often wash up on the shore. Many of them would not be local, so what do you do with these bodies? Well, you have to put them in a makeshift morgue until further arrangements can be made for their burial. One such makeshift morgue is, you've guessed it, the Three Mariners Inn.
See you then for another adventure into the darkness on a very special night.